So again, welcome everyone to our presentation. It's called Why Me? Because I'm Asian, a phenomenological inquiry of anti-Asian hate crimes from parents' perspectives. My name is Dr. Marlon Johnson, and I am the facilitator and chair of the Professional Development Committee here with Counselors to Social Justice. We have 5 presenters to you all today who will be presenting some of their research. So I look forward to hearing all of their insights and their work and the outcomes and the support that we can offer as well during AAPI NH Heritage Month. So with that being said, I would like to introduce our presenters to you all. First, we have Dr. Sojong Nam, who is an assistant professor of counselor education at the University of New Mexico. She received her doctoral degree in counselor education and supervision from the University of Iowa. Her professional and research interests center on mental health disparities, mental health literacy and stigma among the underserved, depression and suicidality in youth, and psychometric properties of assessment tools in counseling and counselor education. Next, we have Dr. Go-Eun Na, who is an assistant professor of counseling at Hunter College, the City University of New York, and also a nationally certified counselor. She received her PhD in counselor education and supervision, specializing in school counseling from the University of Maryland at College Park. Her scholarship and research interests focus on multicultural counseling, social justice, and advocacy in counseling, as well as international issues in counseling. She has presented at a number of local, national, and international conferences on multicultural counseling and social justice issues in counseling. She is also an associate editor of the Journal of Asian Pacific Counseling. Welcome. Dr. Zhongwon Zhang is an assistant professor of counselor education at the University of New Mexico. He received his doctoral degree in counselor education and supervision from the University of Iowa, and his scholarship focuses on mental health and addiction issues among underrepresented populations, multicultural counselor education, and counseling self-efficacy. We also have Dr. Dong Lee, who currently serves as an assistant professor at the State University of New York at Oneota, and has obtained his doctoral degree in counselor education and supervision at the University of Arkansas. His primary research interests lie in the areas of professional identity development, counselor burnout and wellness, multicultural counseling and social justices, and dispositional assessment. He has presented at a number of local, national, and international conferences and is currently serving as an editorial board member of the Journal of Asian Pacific Counseling and the International Journal for the Advancement of Counseling. And last but not least, we have Dr. Jung-Eun Lee, who has been working as a counselor educator for about 10 years and as a dedicated educator, practitioner, and researcher in the field of counseling. She is currently a clinical professor in the Clinical Mental Health Counseling Program at the University of Houston and is an LPC supervisor in Texas. She was trained for CBT in the Beck Institute and has been practicing and presenting on CBT interventions at the national and state level conferences and invited talk sessions. Her research interests have been focused on underserved and socially marginalized populations, including ethnic and linguistic minorities and immigrants and their trauma and resilience. She's also presented at a number of state and national conferences on multicultural counseling, cultural trauma, and CBT. So thank you so much, panelists, for being here and for sharing your knowledge with us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson, for the comprehensive introduction. That reminds me of some of the research work that are stuck and waiting for me to do. And also thank you all for dedicating your Friday afternoon to participate our presentation today. So we are a team of counselor educators who all agreed with the importance of looking at the anti-Asian hate crime during the pandemic. So we will kind of go over, briefly go over our study, and this involves a lot of information, but we will try to give a brief kind of introduction to the study. So let me start sharing my screen. Right, so before we start talking about the study itself, I think we can kind of start thinking about what the definition is for anti-Asian hate crimes. So I don't know if you have used Mentimeter before, but we will try to do a little activity together here. So if you have your laptop with you or maybe cell phone, please go to the menti.com. Let me try to. You know what? This is supposed to give the code, but then maybe we can just do the chat. So let's think about some of the maybe terms or the words that you might want to use to describe what an anti-Asian hate crime would be as a definition. And then if you are willing to share your responses in the chat, we will kind of go over them together, and then we will start from there. If you feel comfortable just talking rather than just typing in the chat, you can also unmute yourself and then just share your response. So a hate crime that is directed toward a person of Asia descent or against the Asian culture, and also a racially motivated attack, projection, and blame based on race. So the reason that we're asking this question before we start our presentation is just because we started our data collection also based on our participants' definition of anti-Asian hate crimes. So maybe the word hate crimes that might have already kind of predetermined like meanings attached to it, but then we thought it might be broader in terms of the definition. And then we had our participants to define what an anti-Asian hate crime is to them. And then these are some of the themes that we were able to derive from our participants. So they mentioned the anti-Asian hate crimes might include some of the abusive, aggressive, and also violent actions or verbal attacks. There's sometimes physical attack and also verbal and also emotional. And then they also all confirmed that these hate crimes might not always be, illegal or dramatic. So it doesn't always have to, for example, be a physical attack or violence, but then maybe some verbal expression, or maybe just having a look at someone. They can also count as anti-Asian hate crimes based on how our participants perceive them. So throughout the interviews and also data analysis, we utilized our participants' own definition of anti-Asian hate crimes. So let me just start with our presentation here.
Okay, so We had this question. So what made us initiate this study in the first place is, so anti-Asian hate crimes have been on the rise in the United States in recent years, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic. So these hate crimes have a devastating impact on the individuals who experience them, as well as on their families and communities. So as an Asian individual myself, I clearly remember the moment when I heard the first hate crime against Asian population in the beginning of the pandemic. Many of you might remember as well. For example, in March 2020, a man physically attacked an Asian American family at a grocery store in Midland, Texas, and stabbing a father and his two sons, ages 2 and 6, because he thought they were Chinese and infecting people with the coronavirus. And I live in Houston, Texas, so the impact was huge, not only for myself, but also for my child, pondering what kind of conversation I need to have with my child and feeling scared about going out to get grocery. And exactly 2 years later, in March 2022, a man physically attacked 7 Asian American women in New York City, and he was arrested and charged for hate crimes. So not just these personal experiences, research shows that Asian American children are not immune to the negative effects of the anti-Asian hate crimes. For instance, they may experience fear, anxiety, and depression and trauma symptoms, and they also face discrimination and bullying from peers and teachers at school. So given the potential short-term and long-term consequences of these exposures to hate crimes directly and indirectly, it is crucial to understand the experiences of Asian and Asian American children and how they cope with such incidents. But those studies are sparse. So in next slide, so what made us focus on youth and collect parents' voices? As I mentioned in the previous slide, the pandemic brought about the inevitable exposure to direct and indirect experience of anti-Asian hate crimes. And also given the lack of research studies, especially on Asian and Asian American youth, we wanted to focus on these youngsters' experiences. But at the same time, we wanted to use parents because they are valuable informants as they make direct interactions with their children. Also, they make observations of their kids on a daily basis in terms of their mood changes and contents of the bedtime talk, implying some unpleasant experiences at school. So using these parents' voices, we wanted to amplify how kids process such traumatic experiences within the family interactions.
So in our research, the primary research team consist of 4 counselor educators and 1 external auditor who review our data analysis process. So we had 3 criteria for participating in our research. So our criteria were parents who have Asian or Asian American children or adolescents, and who have lived with their children during the COVID-19 pandemic in the US, and also who think their children have directly or indirectly experienced or have been influenced by anti-Asian hate crime. So we initially reached out organizations serving Asian and Asian American communities in the state of high Asian population, such as California, New York, Texas, New Jersey, and Illinois. Then we expanded our geographic regions to find more participants. And we also used the social media to distribute our study. And also we use snowball sampling after we find our participants. So in our study, we have a total of 12 parents of Asian American children participate in the study. So 10 mothers and 2 fathers, and parents share their children's identify themselves as American, Chinese, Japanese American, Korean, Korean American, and Taiwanese. And there are 16 children in the study, and 12 girls and 4 boys. And the age is between 6 and 16 years old. So in study, we use Zoom interview. And before the interview, we developed 6 semi-structured questions, and we also ask follow-up questions for clarification. And the interview took about 60 minutes for each. And in our study, we used the Consensual Qualitative Research, CQR approach for data analysis. So the CQR is characterized by the emphasis on collaboration, consensus building, and attention to detail. So this approach allows multiple researchers to bring their own insights and perspectives throughout the data analysis process. And as the first step of data analysis, we began with 7 domains, which is derived from the interview questions and also literature review. And each researcher independently segmented the data into domains and then came together and discussed as a group until we reached a consensus. In the second stage, each researcher independently created core ideas and came back to construct united version of core ideas for each participant. Then finally, we engage in a cross-case analysis to find common themes throughout the participants. So throughout the process, we identified 4 domains as a result.
Right. So I will go over, Dr. Jung and I will go over those findings depending on each domain, but then as I mentioned, this involves a lot of findings. So we will try to focus more on those that were more salient or frequent in terms of their emergence throughout the analysis. So our first domain was about our participants who were the parents' understanding of anti-Asian hate crimes. So as I mentioned, not only that the parents actually identified or defined anti-Asian hate crimes, they also used their own understanding or conceptualization to explain their experiences. So first, they mentioned, I think all participants mentioned that these anti-Asian hate crimes were racially motivated against Asians. I know some of you have shared your definition that are also pertaining to this aspect. So they also mentioned they try to understand where the experiences are coming from or where the incidents are coming from. And then a lot of our participants talked about how the children or the perpetrators are not getting enough education or training, or they don't really have a better understanding of different people. So maybe the ignorance might be one of the cause of the incidents happening towards Asian Americans and also Asian individuals. And then they talked about how there are a lot of different cultural, aspects, cultural differences, but then some people might not have been exposed to diversity or might not have had an opportunity to experience the different cultures. And also they talked about some of the incidents were, unfortunately, they were coming from another minority individual. So we kind of tried to understand where that is coming from. And then we thought this can be connected to the term, which is the internalized racism, so where the minority individuals have been exposed a lot of different discriminations or racist actions. They might start to internalize those messages or those negative experiences, and then they might kind of accept the messages and kind of in turn perform the same actions toward other minority individuals. And also a lot of our participants also talked about maybe these incidents are happening to me just because I don't really know American culture, or maybe because my English is not enough, or maybe I'm not an American. But they were trying to find those reasons from themselves, which was conceptualized as internal attribution. And also throughout the interviews, even though our participants didn't really use the term microaggression, they might not be aware of the term maybe, But then some of the experience that they were kind of describing were related to microaggression, where those experiences were really subtle, and then they were not really able to kind of prove the experiences to other people, or maybe a lot of experiences were related to maybe other people's attitudes towards them, which were based on the stereotypes. So even though it wasn't an obvious action that everyone can kind of see, but then they were still able to feel the differences coming from other the perpetrators. So we thought there are some experiences that are better explained with the microaggression, which is also part of the hate crimes. And also our participants talked about how these experiences are not new. So even though it has increased with the outbreak of the COVID-19, but then they all confirmed that it wasn't a new thing. So that means it was already there before the outbreak, but then it has been increased and it has been exacerbated with the outbreak of the COVID-19. So they talked about, even though it was really pervasive even before the pandemic, it happened more frequently. And also they talked about how the emergence became faster. So the parents talked about these experiences were pretty common for maybe students in the junior high or high school, like senior high schools. But then during the pandemic, it happened much earlier than that. So for example, the children in elementary school or even in pre-K, they experienced anti-Asian hate crimes. So they talked about how the emergence became faster because of the pandemic. And also they described people are kind of mad at everyone. So we all know how we had no idea what was going on when the COVID actually started. And then some people were pretty mad at the situation. They might have been really frustrated because of the virus or the situation and everything, but then they didn't know how to release or express those anger related emotions. And then that kind of became towards Asian people. And then that was conceptualized as PANGER, which is pandemic anger. And also our participants talked about these experiences were not just for them. So they talked about my other Asian friends, my other Asian neighbors, they had similar experiences, something like that. So they knew there were some shared experiences among the Asian individuals or in the Asian community. But then also beyond the Asian community, some of our participants talked about these experiences are not just for Asian people, but then they knew there are some other, minority individuals or marginalized individuals that are having similar experiences. So they were able to talk about those shared experiences as minority individuals in the society. And our second domain was our parents' reactions to the anti-Asian hate crimes in general. So before the incident where their own child or children experienced anti-Asian hate crimes, they knew something was happening out there, and then they started to protect their children in the first place. So for example, they didn't let their children be alone outside. They didn't let the children kind of walk from school to home, and they were always out there to pick up their children instead. So they had extra efforts to protect their children even before the incident. And also after the incident, after their children experienced something anti-Asian hate crimes, they felt helplessness because they didn't know what to do in the first place. So they didn't know what to say, what to do, where to report, where to seek help. And then they talked about how the resources and the information were limited. And then they didn't know what to do. And then coming out of those helplessness, they talked about they were having very diverse emotional experiences, such as being sad, being mad, and also being frustrated. And then without understanding where those incidents are coming from, our participants talked about their children were born and also raised in America, in the United States, but then they're not how they're being viewed by other people in the society. And then they knew this, second-class citizenship will be always there attach it to their children just because of being an Asian. So that was really concerning to our parents. And also, in order to help their children after the incident, almost every participant, every parent, they were trying to initiate conversation with their children first. So they had the discussion with the children about the experiences, whether that is direct or indirect. And also they tried to change some external or environmental factors. For example, they tried to move their children to another classroom or to be separated from the perpetrator, or kind of move to another school, something like that. So they tried to change the environment to protect their children. And also they try to educate their children as well. So in terms of how they can react to such incidents if that happen again, or where to kind of approach after those experiences, like teacher or maybe school staff. And also some of the parents were trying to raise their voices, talking to the school or principal, or maybe participating in some community action based events. And also just because they knew the resources and information were pretty limited, our participants tried to self-teach themselves. So they tried to find information using, internet, like Google, and also they watched some YouTube video to learn about what they can do. So with the limited information and resources, they actually had to teach themselves using other kind of devices or resources to protect their children.
Right, so I will talk about the third and the last domains. So the third one is about children's reactions to anti-Asian hate crime. So first one is about confusion of their feelings. So when they first experience such incidents, most of them didn't know how to react or how to respond to the incident or the behavior. So also this is coming from because they don't understand what the racism or racial discrimination is, and also they don't know where it is coming from, so they were confused, and also at the same time they were curious about why people are doing this towards them. So, and because of the anti-Asian hate crime, yeah, they went over a variety of range of feelings. So first one, yes, they were confused, and also many of them cried and also isolated themselves. And they also experienced different emotions such as anger, frustration, depression, and discouragement because of the experience. And one interesting that we found from our participant is that although they experience such difficult or even traumatic incidents, this does not always end up affecting their academic performance. So we understood that GPA might not be enough factor when we look at the impact of anti-Asian hate crimes towards Asian children. Also about the peer relationship. So sometimes this is a kind of tricky one. Sometimes their friends become the perpetrator, so that they were more confused and they didn't know how to react to the perpetrator or friend's behavior. So also because they don't want to ruin their friendship and peer relationship, so they sometimes just keep quiet. And because of that, so they were reluctant to report their experiences because sometimes perpetrator were their friends. And also they didn't just want to make it as a bigger problem. I think this is also coming from the model minority, the stereotype could be. So because they just don't want to make any trouble in school. So although reporting such incident is not making a trouble or being in a trouble, so yeah, so many of them were reluctant to report their experience, anti-Asian hate crime experiences. And last one is about the resilience and strength. So students or children who were more resilient, who have more inner strengths, they were able to come up with different coping strategies against the incident. And also they were able to reach out for some help from their parents or teachers or any other school staff. And also they were able to self-advocate at the scene of the anti-Asian hate crime or after the scenes. So last domain was resources. So this kind of overlaps with the second and third domains, which were about parents and children's reactions towards anti-Asian hate crimes. So we came up with 4 categories. So first one is about the friends. So after the experience, some Asian children were able to talk with their friends to process or cope with their traumatic experiences. If they have a group of friends who are Asians, they were more likely to better overcome the experiences. Also, when friends were at the scene, sometimes some friends fought with the victim against the perpetrators. And so, and about the school, yes, we found out that school climate and culture are very important when children experience anti-Asian hate crime at schools, because school is the most common place where Asian children experience such hate crimes. So school climate and culture and their policy against such crime has a huge influence on children's and parents' reactions or response. And also when a principal has a strict policy against such discrimination, parents felt more comfortable sending their children to school, and also children feel more safe to go to their school. And also we found that diversity in terms of race and ethnicity is also an important factor for Asian children in order to feel safe at school. So when school does not have teachers or staff who are from diverse background, parents didn't expect much from school because they think they were just a small number from the whole population. Also, most parents who send their children to school with a lack of diversity wish that they had more Asian teachers and counselor or staff and students at school. And some schools did not offer anything, including this discussions about the incident or interventions or any solutions. So the victims, the children, should stay with the perpetrator in the same class, and the mom decided to move her children to another classroom. And also many of the children were not able to get enough support or counseling service from their school counselors. And even some parents do not have understandings of the role of counselors, and which affected their low expectations on school. So overall, training and education for teachers and staff members is very crucial for them to serve diverse students, especially where there is lack of diversity from students level. And also parent education could be also beneficial, so that parents can have better ideas on what to expect from school and where to find support when incidents happens. Third one about the social capital. Based on their resources about social capital, their responses to the experience were very different. So for parents who have better mental health literacy and they knew where and how to seek support, on the other end, parents who do not have mental health literacy, they didn't know where and how to seek support, and even they didn't have much understanding of their children's mental health. And also parents who are aware of community resources or religious group or organizations, they had their children get support from these groups, and also had their children met other Asian children so that they don't feel alone or isolated in the community. Outside of school resources, some children were able to get counseling services outside of their schools because either they couldn't get the service from their school or their school counselor refer them to receive one from outside. And also lastly, most parents try to find information from their family and friends, and also they self-educated themselves by searching YouTube or pocket resources on how to respond against or towards to the anti-Asian hate crimes.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Zhang, and thank you, everybody. So there are some implications and suggestions that we wanted to highlight for school counselors, and counselor educators, based on what we heard from our participants. First of all, we think that we need to go back and see what we already have, and we should begin with what school counselors are doing right now for students and their families. We do have services in the system that have been already implemented for students. All the responsibility that school counselors are doing directly and indirectly working with the students, and they're all supposed to be available for all students. So school counselors may secure and utilize more opportunity to meet students individually or as a group to help students who experience direct and indirect discrimination or microaggression. Classroom lessons, classroom guidance with a specific aim to address diversity, respect, inclusion, and cultural appreciation need to be provided more and more. I'm saying that because one of the stories that our participants shared, like as a common response, which was very exciting. I mean, it is sad but optimistic. Was that there was an increased report on racial discrimination made by students in schools, regardless of their race, ethnicity, which means that they are making school climates, they are making school environments where students are more sensitive to hostile behaviors to each other, more aware of cultural difference, and more respectful for the differences. So we think that school council's efforts and school in general have to be recognized for this positive change. And one of the findings that stood out to us is that schools or parents may think that students do not have any problems if they don't show any academic issues, because we regard their academic performance as a key indicator. But students may learn how to manage their grades, their assignments so well that we don't recognize what is going on in their mind. So comprehensive evaluations of their well-being are necessary, although there's no indicating academic issues. And of course, checking in with them on a regular basis may be also important. We also heard a lot of voices from parents about their disappointment and mistrust on school and school system overall, because of their past experience, witnessing how schools or school administrations have dealt with the discrimination incidents or a situation reported by parents and students. So we should pay more attention to rebuilding the relationship with the parents first. For example, by holding parent conferences, inviting them to a workshop or orientations regarding school policy or guidelines. So, and plus, given that many anti-Asian crimes occur outside of home, outside of parent sites, so it is difficult for parents to initiate engagement in a conversation with students unless it happens in front of them, or unless students their children told them what happened to them. So schools need to raise their voices on behalf of parents and actively engaged in, the prevention and intervention in case of discrimination situations. Next slide, please. Okay. We also have some implications for counselor educators who help our counseling students working with Asian American students. So we met some participants saying that they were confused with their identity in Asian American families, where students view themselves as an American or as Asian American, while their parents view themselves as Asian. So this identity, this confusion or this conflict in their identity could be one of the key topics that should be addressed in the counseling sessions or therapeutic interactions with Asian American families. Lastly, I want to stress the importance of intentional effort in the counseling program and curriculum. So our counseling students need to be given more opportunities to work with clients from underserved populations. For example, there are field experience-based projects that allow students to be more exposed to a group of people from diverse cultures and cultural differences. So creating a program with a strong curriculum will assist our counseling students in working with families who experience direct and indirect anti-Asian crime regardless of their race or ethnicity. Yeah, thanks. Dr. Nam?
Okay, yeah, I was muting. Oh, right. So for the last implication, we found some implications for counselor researchers, which I think might be relevant to many of you here. So first, we all agree that Asians and also Asian Americans are not studied a lot. So this is still understudied population in our field and also underserved population in our profession as well. So as a counselor researcher, we have to have focused more intentionally on this understudied population. I'm not saying we have to study Asians just because we're Asians, but it is beyond that, right? So as a counselor researcher, with some obligations to study and also amplify those heard voices in general, I think we have to intentionally focus more on these populations in our research. And also, for studying the understudied populations, especially, I think it is important to employ some of the participant-centered or community-based research methodologies. So for our study here, we didn't entirely utilize the participant-centered approach for our study, but then we tried to still involve our participants in research design, where we had our participants define anti-Asian hate crimes, which is the central theme of our study. So maybe in the future, we might want to use some more of the aspects of the participant-centered or community-based research methodologies, where the participants are invited in the very beginning and start to identify their own interest in terms of the study, or maybe develop some interview questions or address their needs that are incorporated into the research process. And also, for the last one, we have to expand some of the channels to disseminate our studies. So I think it is one of the dilemma for studying the understudied, because we're not produced by everyone. So studying these underserved or populations that are not an interest for everyone, we have to expand and also kind of add additional channels to disseminate our findings, because our voices and also these populations' needs and also their experiences have to go beyond our community. Just because sometimes maybe people out there sometimes have more power or access to the resources to make some of the positive changes that our participants are actually needing. So it's really important for us as counseling researchers to amplify our findings by expanding our disseminating channels. So this was all for our study and the overview of our study and also implications. And I think it is the time to kind of open the stage to everyone. And then kind of talk about, maybe you can ask questions or make a comment on the study or the presentation in general. And also these are the questions that we can kind of think about together to make some of the implications more applicable for your own work with the population. So please feel free to unmute yourself and maybe show up, turning on your videos. You can also use the chat. Okay, so there is a question from the chat from Kimberly. What about working with youth who identify as biracial, Asian and white? That's a good question. Does any of us want to answer the question? Because we did have some participants who are biracial too. I can speak to some of the participants. So we did have a couple of participants who are coming from biracial families. So it was interesting that even though they're not, I mean, they're biracial and that they share some cultural aspects within the family, those non-Asian parents still want their children to be socialized with the Asian children and also Asian community. And then some of them have actually strong attachment to the Asian community based on where they were kind of raised, or who raised them when they were pretty young. So I think for and as an implication for working with these individuals is that they still value the Asian cultures, even though they were born and raised in the United States as an American. And then that's not, well, we didn't really specify these biracial individuals in the study. But then I think as a counselor, as a school counselor, it is kind of important for them to be able to and to be supported to learn about the Asian culture in general and have more opportunities to be socialized with the community members and Asian community members. Does that answer your question, Kimberly? I know it's limited, right? Any other questions? Or feel free to kind of share your own kind of findings out of our findings.
We do have
So that,
another question from
Yeah.
Carly, who said, were any peer supports available in schools for the students?
Dr. John might be talk about the resources at school.
So some are among the participants, some Asian children who have close friends who are not Asians. I mean, at the scene, they were able to fight against the perpetrator who are doing the anti-Asian hate crimes at the scene. So that the children who are the victims at the moment didn't get, based on their parents' perspective, the child didn't get a lot of huge impact from the experience because the children's friends were able to work as a buffer for the experience. However, the victims who encounter or experience the anti-Asian hate crime by themselves or alone, then at the scene, then they had more impact or the negative impact coming from the experience. However, further experiences, if they have Asian friends who can talk about this or talk about their experience, then they were more able to, process that and also overcome such experience. But however, if their children are living in a place where not many Asian friends around the people around their children, then they had to talk with their parents or other or teachers or other staff members at the school. So we saw it, the social support, especially for children who are like kind of young, is really important to have, because that can work as a huge buffer from the experience.
And also, I think the peer supports were more like coming from at the individual level, where the students, develop those relationships first with their peers in the school. But then I think as one of the implications for our study, we thought it should be coming from the school. It should be more systematic, where the peer support culture is such a school climate. So the students do not really have to, be proactive to reach out to other people first. Even after, those experiences, it might be even harder for them to do that. So we thought it should have come from the school.
We've had two more questions show up in the chat, so we'll try and get to them as best as possible. But first one is from Deborah Headley. Says, in reference to the benefits of supports in diverse schools, did that mean more Asian representation or more racialized diversity in general? So the benefits of supports in diverse schools.
I think it can be both. So our participants talked about wish there were more Asian, wish there were more Asian people, Asian students. But then we also saw a lot of differences between the school that is more predominantly white versus that is more diverse, even though Asian population is still limited, because just being diverse in general, like racially diverse, that was really helpful, because they talk about diversity at least, rather than just being predominantly white. So that should be, both can be considered as diverse schools.
Wonderful. Our next question. Participant is wondering, what supports might you find helpful for the parents? Do you have any recommendations on how schools and community organizations can support parents?
One of the support I can think of from the school is like a school counselor, definitely. And many parents mention they wish they had more support from school counselor around the issues of diversity, around the issues of those like discrimination. But one of the things they said, they really wonder about basically the responsibilities and roles of school counselor. And then also what kind of interventions or what kind of support school counselor provide for their children. So my personal recommendation would be school counselors definitely help students to provide more intervention, but at the same time, after those interventions, it might be important for the Asian parents to be informed about what types of interventions or what kind of dialogue they have been in the session.
Let's see, one last question. I think we can squeeze it in here. First, the participant is grateful for you all who, as they are an Asian American school counselor in a predominantly white area, and have experienced lots of microaggressions and racist attacks towards them specifically. So they're grateful for your work. They wonder, have you had opportunities to present this to superintendents and district level administration and principals? I agree with them that there are some wonderful outcomes that you all are sharing that could be really helpful in guiding some policies around diversity, equity, inclusion, belongingness, and accessibility. But yeah, I'm wondering if there are any opportunities that y'all have encountered just yet.
Not yet. And I think that's a great point because that's one of the expanded disseminating channels, and also their stakeholders, right? They have the power. So I think we discussed how because we focused on school counselors when we talked about the school resources in the first place, and then there was our initial focus to talk about how the school counselors were being available, were being able to support the students. And then throughout the studies, we realized that maybe the school counselors also have their own, lack of resources, lack of support at the school level. So I think we're kind of coming from the bottom level to approach to the school, and then kind of to understand the school counselors' needs and also their experiences being in the school building, but then having to support the Asian students. I think that might give further information that we could deliver to the school level. So that's one of our next directions, where we kind of study the school counselors first to learn about the school system, and then that will inform us, of more information to communicate to the school level. And then we have to kind of build partnerships with the school districts to have access to this, at the school building to talk about these findings. Does that answer your question, Christine?
Collaboration is always the essence of good work here, making research have legs and go out into the world to people who may not always read the journal article or see the things that we do as researchers. So I super hope, and maybe even you all get to connect and collaborate. Maybe as a school counselor, they have an in with some administrators who might be able to work alongside you all.
Thank you so much.
Yes. But I see we're right at time. So I want us to go ahead and give some celebrations to our presenters today for this incredible work. I'm continuously thinking about how my work with all of our work with race and racial equity and healing can do a lot of good to highlight some of these issues of hate, especially anti-Asian hate. We don't move forward unless we move together. So I'm really, really excited about this presentation and the work that you all have done and will continue to do. So thank you for offering this presentation to us today.
Thank you so much.
Participants, if you'll look in our chat, you'll see that I've given you all a link to our CE survey. It just gives us a little bit of feedback on today's presentation and to give us some ideas on where to go next. So please make sure you click that so that you can also receive your certificate for your participation today. Of course, thank you so much for being here on a Friday afternoon. We're so grateful for your time and for your energy. If you are curious, keep your eyes peeled for our next webinar. Save the date of Friday, June 16th, where we will be talking about centering social justice in clinical practice and counseling research. Thank you so much again to our presenters and to each of you for being with us this afternoon. We look forward to seeing y'all at the next event. For now,
Thank you.
have a good Friday. We'll see you later.